Excuse me. So, if we're to look at the traditional channel structure, manufacturing here, our specialized and generalized intermediaries are here, and our end user is here. And of course, we include the end user in our channel environment because the end user performs channel functions. In standard supply chain, you think of goods flowing through sub-assemblies, raw materials, and you tend to think of the goods being pushed through the system in a traditional format, and that's generally how supply chain works, all right? Supply chain's function and ideas is to push the good through the system. Push actually is one of the ways that we both bring goods and we advertise as well. So push means that the manufacturer has their own manufacturer's representatives who work with the specialized intermediaries. They sell to the specialized intermediaries. They sell downstream to the retailers. The retailers have their own store individuals who are salespeople. Those salespeople sell to the end user. Marketing and supply chain is alike in that way. Marketing also has the concept of pull, all right? And what the concept of pull means is that the manufacturer advertises directly to the end user. They create demand from the end user, or let's just say initiate demand. The consumer demands the products, and the products are pulled through the system, all right? So that's another way in which channels and supply chain are different in that way. Interestingly enough, pull has been going on for many years. Pull actually is now branched to in many other places. A great example of pull is when they started advertising that little blue pill directly to end users. I know nothing about it. And they use the magic phrase, consult your doctor. And that is an example of pull. In other words, the pharmaceutical manufacturers initiated to the end users this demand, and it pulls to the system. So that's a couple of ways. Now, there's another way, there's a very dramatic way in which supply chain and channels are different, in that there's more than just the movement of goods through the system. There's actually 9 functions that are performed in the channel environment that expand the breadth exactly of what goes on in channels. So I'm going to show you this next slide. We're going to go over these again in chapter 3. So I don't want you to think that, you know, this is your first and only opportunity, but we want to note that there are 9 universal functions or 9 flows through the channel system, both downstream and upstream, which, yes, you'll need to know what they are. And so here's this wonderful busy slide that has all sorts of funky stuff going on. And so let's talk about it one at a time. First off, this is that over there turned sideways, all right? So you have the producers or the manufacturers, you have 2 specialized intermediaries, you have a wholesaler and a retailer, and then you have the consumer at the end, because as I say again, consumers perform channel functions, all right? The arrows talk about how flow happens in the channel environment. And so, if you look right off the top, physical possession and ownership are separate. Now, that's very interesting. Physical possession and ownership, generally one does follow the other, but not exactly. Anybody can think of an occurrence where physical possession is not connected to ownership. Yes.
Things are being shipped.
Yeah, that's a good example of that. If it's a wholesaler, now the wholesaler takes title, all right? But you're exactly correct. If I were to ship something, it still doesn't necessitate transfer of ownership. Here's another one. Anybody ever heard of a consignment store? You know what it means? What does a consignment store mean?
We basically sell your item for you.
Exactly. Dead on. So what that means is this, is that if you were to go down King Street, near the Funky Record dealership, there's an antique store in there, and that's literally a consignment store. What they have is they have goods from other individuals who bring their antiques in that store, and they in essence have a space. And the individual who owns the consignment store allows them to have their goods there. When those goods are sold, the owner of the shop takes a percentage of that, like charging rent, and in essence, it's transferred, it's in the store, but in essence, the store owner never, ever gets title of the goods. That's an example. So I want you to understand that they can be separate. Negotiation, if you notice, is a two-way deal. Negotiating, financing, and risk are very, very intimately connected together. And as I said before, we're going to just kind of introduce you to this, and we're going to talk about it a little bit differently later. If you notice, ordering and payment is an upstream flow. So that flows upstream. And then the last, which is one of those least thought of, but maybe the most valuable now, especially in the era of the omni-channel, is information sharing. And of course, that flows both ways. All right. Now, I want you to understand 3 rules that are important for you to know when you're looking at this. Okay. One is the channel functions happen at different times. In other words, not all of the functions are executed at once. Classic example is financing. Financing many times has to be first. Ordering, of course, may be before everything. A lot of information sharing goes on before, during, and after the sale. And so you can see that all of these functions happen at different times. But it's important to note that all of the functions exist, okay? The second is not every channel member performs every channel function. As a matter of fact, specialization is the key to an efficient channel. The more individuals that are in there performing unique individualized functions, the more specialized or more efficient the channel is. Specialization is the hallmark of an efficient channel. One individual is doing nothing but financing. One individual is doing nothing but distribution. Each one of those has a value place to play. And physical possession, believe it or not, may not occur to anyone except the end user. And so the end user may be the only one that's in that. But having said that, basically what it means is that all of the channel members may only be performing one function. And then the third thing is that you may remove a channel member You may remove a channel member, but not the functions. There is a process, and this is definitely another one of those test questions that you're going to have. There's a process that has happened over channels over the last 20 years called disintermediation. Disintermediation. If you take that statement apart and go to the Latin roots, you get the part that it means, the removal of the mediators. That's exactly what it means. Disintermediation is the removal of all of the channel partners out of the system, except for the manufacturer and the end user. That's one of the things that has happened for many years now. It's been exacerbated by the omni-channel, but it doesn't mean it's going to replace everything, because many channel members have many valued functions. And you may remove channel members, but you can't remove the functions. If someone is doing those particular functions and they are removed from the system, someone has to come along and take that over. All right. So those are the 3 rules about channel functions.
Is there any chance you'd give an example of number 3? Like how it would take out?
Sure. Let's see. Let's say you have omni-channel, you've got a phone, and the phone, let's say that, well, here's an example, Radio Shack. Radio Shack as an organization went under Chapter 11 and ceased to exist, but the organization in and of itself has survived. They've gone totally online now. And so you can actually order from Radio Shack at this point, even though the physical locations don't exist. Now, the physical locations did some very important things, like physical with possession. They had inventory, they did financing, they did negotiation, the franchises did all of those things. But even if Radio Shack is online and selling to customers directly, they have to still perform all those things. They have to ship those goods to the consumer. They have to provide the financing for those things. They have to do the negotiation. They have to share the information and the payments. So the functions don't go away, even though the franchise as a store no longer exists. I think there's like 50 stores left in the United States. It's fascinating. So I could talk about Radio Shack, but I actually worked for them for years. And it was a great location. They had great ideas. They were into do-it-yourself technology, which would be perfect for now, but the cell phone industry is what ruined them, because they started bringing on cell phones in the 90s. And the difficulty with having cell phones is becoming like your major thing is that cell phones take time to get the contracting and do all the execution. And what it meant is that they had more people who were concerned with the phones than they did with helping customers. And then eventually cell phones went away. They started being sold to company stores, and Radio Shack lost its footing and lost their way, unfortunately. So these are the 9 universal functions. So a couple of things just to note: some functions move forward through the channel. I should say downstream also. Some functions move backwards or upstream, like ordering and payment. And then other functions can move in either direction. Information sharing, connections, those kind of things, financing, risk, negotiation can be constant. And so we're just touching on these. And like I said, by chapter 3, we're going to get to know these like old friends. Okay. The last slide I'm going to show you on this chapter is going to be the framework in which channel strategy works from. So as I've said before, channels is a process, not an event. And what this framework does is it shows you the process perfectly known by Palantir, that this is an iterative process. And so an iterative process is the snake that eats its own tail. It is constantly being done and redone over and over again. And so where we are right now is we're at the analysis phase, where we're going to start talking about end user analysis and make or buy analysis. So this is chapters 1 through 3, the analysis phase is what we're going to talk about. The decision phase is when we start talking about the 3 main things we need to think about when we're designing our channels. And you don't have to worry about this, but intensity, channel type, and dual distribution, whether or not we're going to sell directly to consumers. The next is we're going to compare and contrast well-developed channel systems that are out there now and talk about their strengths. We'll talk about retail, wholesale, franchising. We'll talk about the omni-channel now and where we're going in the future. And then finally, what we're going to talk about is these last 3 here, that when we implement channel systems, we must deal with individuals, not just with names and numbers. And how do we go about, in essence, inserting what we feel is our best interest in our partners? And so we'll talk about power, conflict, and relationships. And as I said, it's going to get very Dr. Philly, okay? And so this is the framework. It's an iterative process. We implement, we check our results, we reanalyze, we remake decisions, we benchmark how we're doing, and then we implement, okay? All right, end of chapter 1. Now, I have a commercial here I'm going to show you, and I'm going to try to make it loud enough and hopefully not blow your ears out at the same time. So, from principles, we have 3 main functions: segmentation, targeting, and positioning. Segmentation, targeting, and positioning have traditionally been thought of as the bailiwick for price and promotion and product, but it's just as important, and maybe even more important than all, for place. Segmentation can be done by channels. And this is a great example that Walmart shows us. Now, this commercial is going to be signaling to you, all right? I want you to look at the signals, and I want you to think of who this commercial speaks to. So let's see if I can do this without blowing your eardrums out. Okay, I can do better than that. Yeah, turn that off. Crank it up. All right, here we go.
Yeah.
It's the future, Michael. Oh, I'm not Michael. Oh, don't worry, he calls everyone Michael.
Easter egg. That's Sam Walton's original truck. That's the one he basically developed the whole concept of Walmart, but way back in 1963. Mr. Sam drove that all around the United States. Interestingly enough, this is another tidbit. Target, Kmart, and Walmart all started the same year, 1963. Kind of interesting. Of course, Kmart and Target started in Minnesota, Walmart in Bentonville, Arkansas. All right. This commercial is screaming market segmentation at you. So what's the commercial for? What's the point of the commercial?
Grocery pickup.
Grocery pickup. Buy online, pick up. Do you have to go in the store? No. All right. So anybody recognize the song? I wouldn't expect. Scary Newman in Cars. Okay, so that's where it comes from. Very 80s, oh gosh, Dilte pop. So anyway, where are all these cars come from? What era? 80s and 90s. Okay, yeah. So you're getting in the vibe now. So who is this commercial made for? Thank you. That's it. That's exactly it. It's aimed at individuals who grew up in the 80s and 90s. And now what are they? Adults who might have kids. Yes, you get it. There it is. There's where you're going. Okay. So this is a commercial. It's not buy online, pick up in store. It's buy online, pick up at the curb. And this is a perfect example of market segmentation by channels. All right. Now it's important also to note that when you do market segmentation by channels, you're not trying to go after the exact same segmentation with two different channels. All right. You actually have a unique subdivided group. Those are the ones that you want to target. And so this leads us into this next chapter. So here we go. So when we perform an end user analysis, one of the major points we're doing in this is it is important for us to try to find out where our customers are. Why? Because the end users hold the power of the purse. All right. It is very important for us to satisfy the consumer's ideas about how they want it as much as it is what they want. I might want a jar of mustard, but I may not want a jar of mustard in a restaurant size. That would be an example. When we're designing efficient channels, it's not about what the end users want to consume, but how they want to buy it and how they want to use it. This is what this chapter does. This chapter focuses on the demands of the end user, the demand side of marketing. And one of the reasons why marketing, we very much use the term not supply chain, but demand chain, because demand is our focus. So we all know that end users have their own personal preferences. We also know this is that consumers have this way of being kind of clumped together many times. In that consumers, in essence, we can find many times that consumers we can identify as groups of individuals who have the same demands and ideas. If we think about marketing research goes into a great deal of understanding about what is this given segment? How do we give it a name? What are their characteristics? Well, it's the same thing about our consumers here. We want to know how our consumers wish to buy a product or service. And so in channels, we call those service outputs. A service output is an element that describes how a product or service can be bought. And I should also say delivered and consumed. You might as well put all of those in there. So, has anybody ever seen PODS? Anybody got an idea what those are?
Like
Yeah.
moving boxes.
Yes, excellent. Pods, okay. So pods is in essence a rolling kind of storage. Pods is a great example of a unique market segment that is used by individuals in the United States who are in some form of transition in one way or another, and who do not wish to have their goods stored in some other inventory location in a static place. Pods, in essence, they bring the shelter to you. You put your goods in it. When you're ready, they'll come and take it. They'll deliver it anywhere across the United States. This is an excellent example of market segmentation that is built around consumers and how they wish to do things. So without further ado, let's talk about service outputs. So all else being equal, one of those universal rules, end users prefer a channel that performs more service outputs. All things being equal. The more service outputs that a channel performs, the greater value consumers give it. And we have 6 categories here, and we'll talk about them one at a time. So, like our slides here, you're given the main category, and we're going to go through them individually one at a time right now. So the first is bulk breaking. Bulk breaking is the end user's ability to buy a desired, probably small, number of units. In a general whole, consumers find greater value in small lot sizes than they do in large ones. It reduces the need for end users to carry unnecessary inventory. Which also expands the amount of usable space that they may have. So the example, of course, is to go to Costco and get 128 rolls of toilet paper and then having to break them up. Smaller lot sizes are more desired. The more bulk breaking you do and the smaller the lot sizes you have, the higher the service output level. What is the corollary to smaller lot sizes? Price. But price is not a service output, and we'll talk about that later. So, an example of this. We went to New Bern on vacation for the summer. And whenever we go, we carry like a small inventory of household cleaning items. And so one of them is a Palmolive travel one about this big. And the Palmolive bottle we bought this size was the exact same price as a Palmolive bottle that size. Why? Because the smaller size has greater value. You're willing to pay considerably higher amounts because you're using it in a more efficient manner. You get greater utility for it. All of those are reasons why. Especially now, vice goods come in smaller packages. What's the magic number, by the way, in soft drinks and also in candies that they're trying to hit their sizes? There's a magic number. Under a certain number is what the smaller lot sizes are all about. Calories. So they're trying to shoot for under 100 calories now for candies and for soft drinks. I find it interesting that the 8-ounce cans are becoming so much more acceptable now. Makes a lot of sense because they're 90 calories. And of course, if you notice, they still have big candy bars, but if you notice the line on it says tear and share, like I'm going to share my M&Ms, okay? But that's generally the way they do it. They take the larger sizes and they make them, in essence, break them into smaller lot sizes. And there's a purpose for that. That's a reason, because there's greater value in 2 regular size than 1 large. Just the way it is, human nature. So bulk breaking is first. The next is spatial convenience. How close? One of the things that we have, especially now, is a large decentralization in the markets. So, believe it or not, Piggly Wiggly was the actually first neighborhood supermarket that was ever developed in Tennessee. The whole concept's kind of spread out. I'm always fascinated with the fact that community supermarkets are coming back again. I also find it interesting that Dollar General seems to find that in their lead choice. But spatial convenience, especially, it's important to realize it's for spatially convenient items as well, such as fast-moving consumer goods and convenience items, where you only want to buy it in the most convenient place. Now, the interesting thing about vending machines when they came out in the 30s is there was quite a ruckus with supermarkets at that time, because supermarkets thought that they were taking away business that's going inside to get a drink instead of just getting it outside. And what the Coke company had to do, well, they didn't have to, I mean, they had all the power, but they had to convince people that the individuals who were outside buying a drink at the vending machine were different than the individuals who were going in the store to buy those things. And they are. Once again, it's market segmentation, all right? Not only is it spatial convenience, but it's breaking bulk because you're just buying 1 Coke. And so there's a perfect example of when both of them are combined together. Wait time. How long are you willing to wait? Usually, the longer end users are willing to wait, there generally is some compensation that they receive. And intensity of demand, we are generally much more relaxed and easier about waiting on the pre-sale versus the post-sale, especially when it is a critical need item. Generally, you do not want end users to wait too long when they have made a commitment. You want to get those goods in their hands as fast. As a matter of fact, you hope to get their goods in their hands before they make the choices, because the choice is half made. Anybody ever shopped for a car at a dealership yet? It's going to be an experience. So you're gonna drive your car in. First thing they're going to do is they'll look at something on the lot and they'll say, why don't you take that out for a test drive? While you're taking it out on the test drive, they're taking your car, making you go to the service department. And they'll say, why don't you take that car home for the weekend and try it out? So you come back Monday morning, contracts are all laid out. We're gonna give you $3,000 on your vehicle, sign here. How it works, okay? They have to get you in the car before you ever buy it. And that's another perfect example of how service outputs can all be changed too. Now we tend to be, as I said, much more forgiving on the initial purchase, but not forgiving at all on the post-purchase. Price premiums, absolutely. Generally, in-house service, 4-hour repairs is generally 25% of the original purchase price. So if you buy $100,000 worth of equipment and you want a service contract for commitment of service within 4 hours, generally that's another 25% on top of it. And you pay it, especially if it's critical, all right? I remember I worked at a bank and the new phone system was $168,000 and they just rounded it up to an even 2,000 to take care of the service. Nice enough. Realize that all of these can combine together, just like I gave you an example before. And so the example they give here is the Mexican market. And usually what they have is there's actually a gap. And we'll talk about service gaps and cost gaps. There's actually a gap in there where delivery to individuals in smaller lot sizes is not being done. And so what you generally find is that one individual in an apartment complex will gather all the money together, go out and buy a keg of beer, and then sell it to their neighborhood buyers who can't afford a 6-pack. They do this in Russia as well. You'll actually have one individual in the neighborhood who will brew vodka. And what will happen is that you just bring your liter container with you and you buy it that way. One of the things that we know about channels is it's like Jurassic Park, nature finds a way, all right? If a channel is not there, it's either created naturally or someone's going to come up with the idea, okay? And so this is an example of how this works. Product, variety, and assortment. Okay. This is the difference between Walmart's grocery and Harris Teeter. All right. Variety is the generically different classes of goods that constitute a product offering. The breadth of the lines. Many, many ones. Assortment is how deep each line actually is. My example for Walmart from last week was, if you go to Walmart, you're going to find that Walmart has a good variety and a good breadth, but not necessarily an assortment. Walmart will have one of everything, maybe 3 of everything or 4, but they're not going to have 37 or 38 like a Harris Teeter would. And it's very important that the assortment of goods for each place is offered to each target consumer as well. And so while Walmart tends to gravitate to customers across the United States in a more generic fashion, Harris Teeter and especially Lowe's Foods, they kind of craft the things that they have generally towards the individuals in their area that buy from them. If anybody's been to a Winn-Dixie is very much the same way. They're crafted for the southeastern United States. It's interesting that there's quite a bit of bleed over from Lowe's Foods. I can actually get Blue Plate mayonnaise from New Orleans here at Lowe's Foods. I don't talk about it a lot because people get real angry when you talk against Duke. So they'll go to war over that. So anyway, I enjoy it a lot. So, variety and assortment. So here's an example.
Yes.
So, Hot Topic. Hot Topic is a very fascinating company because one of the old maxims about business is you can never make money on a fad. Because quite simply, fads go in and they go out and they go out of business and they're done with. But Hot Topic actually has been able to make it work. They target a young group, your group, all right? They target and make decisions that general rule are made in 6 weeks to 3 months. They get them done in 2 weeks or less and start right away printing them. And not only that, but they wait almost to the point where the fad is almost over and they throw them in the bargain bin and they go on. It's really interesting how they can do this where other companies can't. And so this is an example of a corporation that's found a way to make these things work. And they work quite well. So good for them. So when speed is critical, Hot Topic's found a way. Right assortment, right time. Generally, by the way, fashions are in most places like 6 months ahead. So you're already starting to see Halloween stuff and even getting ready for Christmas in other locations. That's generally the way it works. If you're looking for fashions for fall, many times those fall fashions have already gone. They're being replaced by something else. You're always trying to stay ahead. Put that down in my way. Customer service is a service output function. In a rigid and highly competitive market where products are generically considered the same, you can separate yourself by having superior customer service. Excellent service can directly translate into sales and profits. They talk about DirecTV here. One of the things that DirecTV does is they go ahead and give every one of their customers reps everything that DirecTV has. So what it means is that the customer service reps, the CSRs, have everything that DirecTV can possibly have, and so they become experienced users with them. Their rate of turnover is much lower than the others. And it's because they invest in their sales reps. It's what's called generic and specific or idiosyncratic investments. You're willing to invest in your downstream members, to your employees so that they can provide the service to their customers. So one of the things, I had to go get a new battery for my Highlander. And I went over to AutoZone and I said, it's probably dying. So the regular part of the battery is okay, but I have to stop and start Highlander, which stops at a stoplight. The reserve part was toast. So he tried out the battery. He pulled the battery for me, tested it, did everything for me. That's an example of customer service, especially in this day and age, that was so overwhelmingly good that, I'm all for that. Absolutely. Customer service can make a difference. Nothing else does. Has anybody ever been to a Cabela's? Yeah, it's cool, isn't it? Okay. So Cabela's is like, I don't know, dad's toyland, if you want to say for a better word of it. Okay. Cabela's fights against the whole thing that guys don't like to shop. Well, maybe they don't, but they might browse if it's interesting. Okay. So what Cabela's has done is created these natural stores and natural locations inside the stores themselves, and they're as big as a Buc-ee's. Anybody been to a Buc-ee's, by the way? Oh my God. Okay. It is the loudest place on the planet. I mean, it is loud when you go inside. 240 gas pumps. I'll talk about Cabela's. I'll talk about Buc-ee's later. Anyway, Cabela's. The Cabela's in Baton Rouge on O'Neill Lane built a lake, a 3-acre lake, so that if you like one of their bass boats, you can get in the bass boat and drive it around the lake. Right? That's the kind of experience, an example of customer service that a Cabela's brings. All right. It appeals to other members of the family, of course, but there's something unique and visceral about it. I went there one time and they had the tank was 15 feet tall, maybe 20 feet long, and there was someone on the top showing how to bass fish through a clear tank, watching the fish come and how to set the hook and everything. I was just fascinated watching it. That's the kind of things, how customer service doesn't necessarily have to be targeted individually, but in overall. The last and maybe the most important is information sharing. Information sharing can be the most important thing. Especially when it is what's known as solutions retailing. What is solutions retailing? It is information sharing that provides some answers that you've been looking for. So if you go to Lowe's Home Improvement Center, I love to call it Argos, but Home Improvement Center, they started back, if you notice on the chalkboard, to having classes in like how to do tile and those kind of things. This is a perfect example of what solutions retailing is. It's information sharing, but it's there for a point. I used to do weekly workshops on doing things when I was working at the computer store, and it all pays off. So, what was not mentioned was price. Price is not a solution, or excuse me, price is not a service output. It's what the consumer pays to consume. It's significant because people make trade-offs always. And so it is important to consider price, but it's also more important to consider the value of the service output for the end user. Now, these may not be collectively exhaustive. There may be other service outputs that are out there, but these are the ones that we have listed now. So these 6 service outputs are how we define consumers and how we create marketing segmentation through channels. Before we go, I will not be here Thursday. Contain your disappointment. Okay. I have to go do a workshop with Elevate Textiles down in Charlotte. We're looking at making a bid to them. Please don't be here Thursday. I won't be. If I will have a recording online for that chapter segment, so we won't miss a beat. So, any questions? If not, have a great week. See ya.
Thank you. No problem. I always got lots of notes.
Yeah, that's.